There we go. Is that better? My bad, Joey. Sorry to call you out. So I have to say, after being gone last week and speaking at another church and doing the whole pastor swap thing, I was reminded yet again that I love our church so much. And so they were great people, godly people, wonderful people, but you're my family. And so it's really good to be back here. What? Thank you. Yeah, God. Oh, okay, good. Thanks. I was really fishing for that, so it was, yeah. So a few weeks ago, we started a new series that we're calling This Is Us. And for those of you that know the TV show, I'm ripping the title from the TV show, which is just about a family, because I want us to think about who we are together. And simply put, a church is just a family. And that family metaphor is a metaphor that's used all throughout the Bible, that we are brothers and sisters who have been redeemed, that we are loved and forgiven by our Father, and He wants us to come together and live in unity. And so simply put, we're just a family. But what kind of a family are we? Like who are we together? And what are we trying to become together? Every family has distinguishing characteristics. Every family is defined by who they are together. And so for us, for this family, who are we? What defines us? What are we about? So our leadership team has been talking about this for years and years. And a few years ago, we boiled this down to a 2-word statement that ultimately we want to strive to be about what? Love lived. Yeah, if you're a James fan, it's love lived, baby. And so in week 1, we looked at a famous passage in the New Testament, and the Apostle Paul was writing to this young church, like new church in Corinth, and he wanted to help them understand their main objective. He wanted them to remember why it is that they gather, why they come together, the ultimate goal in everything that they do. And this needed to be addressed because, as churches sometimes do, they had begun to think of spirituality in ways that really had missed the point. And so they had taken parts of spiritual life and elevated them and made them the main thing. And so Paul reaches out and he writes to them to say, wait a minute, guys, never ever forget the main thing. Never ever forget what this is really all about. Never elevate spiritual practices as the primary goal. And so here's what he wrote. This is what Paul wrote to his friends in Corinth. He says, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. And so no matter what else is going on in a church family, if the family isn't practicing love more and more, it is missing the point. And so looking at Paul's warning to the Corinthians, we said in the first week, love is more important than dynamic experiences with the Holy Spirit. Love is more important than spiritual knowledge and insight. And love is more important than extreme religious devotion. And yet, guys, it's amazing, isn't it, how often spirituality gets redefined in one of these forms. And the importance of love and of living love gets lost. Now, as we said in the first week, okay, experiencing the Holy Spirit, if you're a follower of Jesus, that is critical. Growing in our spiritual knowledge and our insight is vital, and engaging in regular spiritual practices is essential. In fact, you will not grow in love the way that God wants without these things. But we can never, ever mistake them for the ultimate goal. The goal is love. And these things are only working right if they are producing in us greater and greater amounts of love. And what happens is if we start seeking any of these things on their own, for their own sake, it will actually lead us away from love. Like pursued wrongly, these things actually make us less loving. And so Paul continues in what have become very famous words. He paints a picture of what love is. And he's like, guys, this is why it matters so much. He writes, love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love is the most beautiful and the most powerful thing. And so at Brookview, we're about love being lived in three directions. And so we've been talking about this a lot over the last year. We're about love being lived up toward our Father. We're about it being lived in toward one another. And we're about it being lived out to the world around us. And so when we think about what a church is supposed to be, if we neglect any one of these three, we are going to be missing something vital. So we're talking about each of these one at a time. And we've already looked at up toward our Father. And so today is about love lived in toward one another. And to get us into this morning, I want to revisit something that we talked about this summer. I want to start with a very simple question, maybe the most simple question. What makes you happy? Now think about it. What makes you happy? That's one of the most basic of all human questions. But at the end of the day, at the end of your life, the way that you've answered that question or attempted to answer that question will determine how you've spent your life. Now, some of you know what makes you happy. Like you have figured it out and you have experienced it, and yet sometimes you forget. And so it's good for all of us to rethink this every once in a while. For others of you, to be honest, you have no idea what makes you happy. And here's how you can tell. You aren't happy. You aren't happy because really you have no idea what makes you happy. And so I just want to throw this out there. If you keep trying to be happy and you aren't happy, it might just be that you don't know what makes you happy. And so at the risk of sounding like incredibly presumptuous, today I'm going to attempt to tell you, or to begin by telling you, what it is that makes you happy. And if you're sitting in here and you're like, listen, like flannel-shirted preacher guy, like you don't even know me. I just want to say that's true. I don't know some of you. But before you write me off on this, you might want to hear what I have to say. And if you disagree on this, feel free to disagree, okay? Okay, you have permission. Disagree quietly to yourself. Okay, here we go. What makes you happy? Well, if you were here this summer, these first few minutes are going to kind of be review for a second. If you caught that particular Sunday that we talked about this. But this is going to launch us into it today, and this is a big deal. What makes you happy? Well, here's something that I think most of us have discovered. Happiness is more about a who than a what. And this is one of the earliest lessons that we learn in life. Most of us learned it in the backyard. Because at some point you were a little kid and you were playing in the backyard and it didn't really matter what you had. It could have been a rock or a stick or whatever. It didn't really matter what you had because there were a bunch of who's in the backyard with you. And that was really all that mattered. And then you went to elementary school, and if you found a group of who's, it didn't really matter what you had. And then you went to middle school, and then you went to high school, and you think about it. It didn't really matter what you had as long as, this is the ultimate thing, as long as you were included in the right group of who's. I mean, at its core, happiness is ultimately about relational connectedness. It is. And you think about it, if happiness was really about a what, we could all just go out and get our happy what, and we'd just be happy all the time. And it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter how you treated me. It wouldn't matter if you included me. It wouldn't matter if you liked me. It wouldn't matter if you respected me. None of that would matter because I could just go home at the end of it all and get my happy what and be happy. But you know how it goes. We know this. Happy what always leads to happy what's next. I mean, maybe some of you are super excited about your new phone. But honestly, you think about it, you were just as excited about your previous phone. But then it got old and you needed a new phone, and soon, I hate to tell you this, your new phone will be old. And guess what? You're going to need a new phone. And this is true of your car, it's true of your purse, true with your next vacation. Okay, happy what always leads to happy what's next. There is no what that will provide lasting happiness. Or maybe you can think about it this way. In the end, you will have relational, not possessional regrets. In the end, nobody goes out and makes things right with a what. Like in the end, it's not about what's, it's about who's. Like ladies, you're not going to say, honey, you're on your deathbed and you're like, honey, I really need you to bring my shoes to the hospital. I just need like one more time with my shoes. Okay? It won't be like that. It's not going to be that way with your stamp collection or your gun collection or your purse collection or your whatever collection. Because in the end, it's always about some who's. Because happiness is relational in nature. And so let me summarize to this point. If I ask the question, what makes you happy? One way to answer that would be no thing. Okay, it's more about a who or a group of who's than a what. See, there is no thing that will make you happy. And just to pound that home, let's repeat that together. Okay? What will make you happy? Nothing. What will make you happy? Nothing. Okay. And so whatever it is that makes you happy, it's not a what. But I think for us, we can take this even one step further. Here's something else. As long as you are all about you, you won't be happy. The more you're about you, the less happy you'll be. Because here's the deal. The more you focus on you, the less you focus on the yous around you. In fact, if you were able to get yourself exactly the way you want yourself, and you think about what does that entail? I don't know. Maybe the right size, maybe the right shape, maybe the right income, maybe the right car. Okay, all of that. If you got you exactly the way you want you, I'm going to tell you something. You still won't be happy. But this is not usually the way that we see it, because we just sort of naturally think, and we are taught in our culture to think, if I could just get certain things, have certain things, live in a certain way, live in a certain lifestyle, have a certain level of health, have a certain look, I'd be happy. But the truth is, you cannot consume, acquire, or exercise your way to happiness. In fact, if you obsess on any of this stuff, you're actually going to end up less happy. And here's why. Because at its core, all of this stuff is ultimately about you. And there's been a ton of research on this. And here's what the research says time and time again. You cannot consume, acquire, or exercise your way to happiness, but you can serve and volunteer your way there. Like all over the world in different cultures, researchers have asked, is there a connection between happiness and selflessness? And is there a connection between even health and selflessness? Is there a connection between health and happiness and volunteering and serving? And again, okay, we looked at this over the summer, but if you get on your computer, not right now, but if you get on your computer and look into it, you'll discover that project after project after project, they keep coming back to the same conclusion. There is a deep connection between health, happiness, and people's willingness to serve or be selfless in some way. The University of Chicago did a study asking, what are the most fulfilling careers? And they made a list, and here's what they came up with. And they just took several different careers that were kind of alike, and they grouped them together. They put them in categories. But here's what they came up with. Top most satisfying jobs. Number 1, jobs where people are caring for others. Number 2, jobs where people are teaching others. Number 3, protecting others. What's the common thing here? Others. Yeah, and then there's creative pursuits. And I just threw that up because that's number 4, and I didn't want to, get shifty with the facts. So it turns out that careers that are fundamentally about other people are the ones that lead to the highest levels of career satisfaction. They also discovered that there is no income level associated with career satisfaction. Let me just repeat that. There is no income level associated with career satisfaction, okay, once you get beyond a certain point. So once a person has reached a certain level of income, once they have basically reached a point where they can eat and pay the bills and live indoors, higher levels of income don't equate to higher levels of happiness. And then there was another study done in the UK. They looked at 40 different studies that all asked the question, is there connection between happiness and selflessness, between happiness and health and serving other people? So they looked at 40 studies that had been conducted over a period of 20 years, and they discovered some extraordinary links between volunteering, health, and happiness. Now, this isn't like people who volunteered one time 10 years ago. Okay, they're talking about people who regularly carve out time to serve others. It could be in the community, it could be in their church, it could be overseas, it could be at school, it could be any of that, but it's something that is regularly built into their life. And here's what they found about links between volunteering, health, and happiness. They found that people that do this regularly, there's less depression, there's less heart disease, there's lower stress, there's less drug abuse, and there's less unplanned pregnancy. And this is just like a small sample, okay, of mountains of research that are out there. And I invite you to look into this for yourself. Okay, but to summarize, I think we could say one of the best things that you can do for yourself is to not focus so much on yourself. Now, the research on this is utterly overwhelming, and that leads like the scientists and the researchers to come up with theories. Like, why is it that self-absorbed people struggle both emotionally and physically, while selfless, other-centered people tend to thrive? And of course, there are all kinds of theories out there. And I saw one theory that said, for men, part of why this works is that men are positively rewarded for selflessness because women find it sexy. That actually this whole thing is just linked to the mating ritual. And so I was like, oh, dang. Maybe that explains why Jen is so powerfully drawn to me. She's just turned on by my selflessness. Like, she can't help it because it's just part of her evolutionary development. I mean, they have all these different theories, right, about that are based on evolution and all these attempts to explain why selfless people are happier. And I'm looking at this as someone that follows Jesus and thinking there might be a simpler explanation. I mean, it couldn't just be that this is how you and I have been designed by God. That God has designed you so that if you want to be filled up, you have to find a way to pour yourself out. And maybe it just is turning out that science is confirming what Jesus followers have always known, that when you pour yourself out, somehow you get filled up. And I think this is why the New Testament is filled with all of the one another's. And I don't know if you know what I mean by the one another's, but all the stuff that we are invited to live together. Love one another, care for one another, serve one another, forgive one another, carry one another's burdens. See, if we actually live that stuff, it's amazing how in the end we find ourselves filled up. Now, I want to steer this back to our discussion about our church. Because we exist to live love, and that includes in toward one another. Church is not supposed to be like a building I go to. It's not even a service I go to. Ultimately, church is supposed to be a family that I belong to. And when you look at the ancient description of the very first church, what you see is not a building and what you see is not a service. You see a family. And what an extraordinary family it was. We're going to look for a second here at a description that was written by Luke, okay, a Greek doctor who became a follower of Jesus. And Luke wrote a gospel that we call what? Luke. Good, okay. And then he also wrote another book that we call Acts, okay, which is just short for Acts of the Apostles. And it's all about what happened right after Jesus was gone. And in Acts chapter 2, Luke gives us this description. This is the very first gathering of Christians that's ever been described. But here's what he writes. He says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. So at this point, there are about 3,000 Christians in the entire world, and they're gathering in different ways all around the city of Jerusalem. Almost all of them are Jewish, and they have devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, which is, it's like, of course. I mean, they want to know about Jesus. They want to know what he taught, what he did, what it all means. But right away, Luke describes something else. He says they also devoted themselves to fellowship, to the breaking of bread. In other words, they were deeply connected to one another. They were getting to know one another in the most intimate of ways for their culture, which was around meals. Luke says they were eating meals together regularly. They were sharing that intimate, sacred space together. And to me, it's just beautiful. And Luke goes on. He says, everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. So God's power and blessing on this new community was obvious. Just as the authority of Jesus was accredited by miracles, the apostles' authority was being accredited in that same way. Luke continues, all the believers were together and had everything in common. Again, this is not a building. It's not a service. It's a community. And Luke describes what was happening. He says, they sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. They sold property and possessions personally to give to anyone who had need. In other words, when people in the community were in obvious need, those that had the ability provided and cared for them. Those that had property would occasionally sell it to provide. They'd sell property to care for their brothers and their sisters in need. And I look at the generosity and I look at what's being expressed here and I think, man, this is what Jesus had in mind. This is the kind of family that he wanted. And what you could see is this family of people just growing closer and closer together as they one another. This community that was bound together by their new faith, bound together by the reality of the love of Jesus and his sacrifice. And Luke continues. He says, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. Now, these people were, for the most part, dirt poor. And many of them were marginalized. They were slaves and that kind of thing. Life was hard. But they found love and joy in community together. And Luke says they enjoyed the favor of all the people. Now, what does that mean exactly? I don't know. But it sounds beautiful to me. And Luke wraps up his description with this. He says, and the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Well, you think about, well, sure. I mean, this was the most gracious, loving community anyone had ever seen. The little community came to embody the inverse law of happiness. They had truly discovered that if you want to be filled up, you have to find a way to pour yourself out. And they were learning to live this in every arena of their lives. But the real power for them was that they lived it together. You know, when I met Jen, I'd only been a follower of Jesus for like 2.5 years and come out of a really rough background. But as we got to know each other, I just saw Jen live her faith out. And I realized that she had a very different approach in this whole thing from me. I went to this really big church, and I really liked the preaching. I was like, that guy's hot. That guy's good. And the music was, honestly. It's like, But I had lots of friends there, and so lots of people that were my age, just like me. And so I loved the teaching, and I loved the friends. I tolerated the music. But Jen went to a different church, and she also went to a very large church. But she was like involved in all this stuff. Like I went to my church. Like she served in her church. And she was involved in all this stuff. Like she taught kids. On Sundays, she taught kids. On Wednesday nights, she taught kids. And then she would like babysit some of those very same kids, like for free. So she would watch these kids and she would, let their parents get time together, and she'd invite those kids over and she would invest in them. Like when they came over, she was like totally engaged with them. They were playing games, or she was baking with them, or she would take them on field trips, just like building into them. And then sometimes she would like go to coffee with ladies in the church that were much older than her from her small group. And she would just invite them to tell her about their lives. And she would pray for them, and she would encourage them, and she would listen to them. But ultimately, what was obvious to me is that it was all about them. And then get this used to just floor me. This irritate me when I was like at church with her. But anytime at church that they said, hey, we could like really use some help with, blank. If she could, she would sign up and she would always go help. Like just all the time. And so I'd be like, hey, Jen, want to watch a movie tonight? And she'd be like, I can't. But want to come help me with 4-year-olds? And I was like, no. Okay, but being with you, like, okay, yes, please. And pretty soon, I was with her doing all this stuff. And pretty soon after that, I discovered, you know what? I like it. I ended up teaching 4-year-olds every Wednesday night, and it was awesome. Those kids, man, like they're hilarious. They were awesome. But with all of this serving and with all of the demands of it, do you know what it did to Jen over time? You know what she was like? Just all the serving and all the stuff. She was angry and hateful all the time. She was so self-absorbed. I mean, lucky for her, she was easy on the eyes, man, because otherwise... No, like, it was the most amazing thing. She was giving all of this, and she was filled with so much joy. Like, I had never seen anything like it. It was unexplainable. And she just had this joy, and it just radiated. And when I was with her, I could feel it, and it just was contagious, and it rubbed off on me. She had truly discovered the secret that happy people learn, which is that if you want to be filled up, you have to find a way to pour yourself out. And it was the way that she viewed like every aspect of her life, like every relationship, every context. She lived this everywhere, but she especially lived it, I noticed, at church. And to be honest with you guys, I joke about all kinds of different things drawing me to her in the early years. This is what drew me to her. It is. And she discipled me. She taught me how to follow Jesus. Because just living life with her was an education. It was also like a roller coaster at times. I felt like I was hanging out with the Tasmanian devil. But it was unbelievable. And I will tell you that no one has grown me more than she has. A few years ago, Jen and I were hanging out with old college friends of mine from that very time period. And they were a couple that had both been friends of mine like individually, and then they got married after college. Some of you have seen that happen, or you kind of watched that happen. But we were out at their house for dinner a few years ago, and my old friend, who happened to be an old roommate of mine, said, right now we're kind of looking for a church. He says, but I have this formula for evaluating churches. And he smiled and he said kind of smugly, like be prepared for my great wisdom. He said, I have 3 criteria, and they're in this order. He's like, number 1, how's the preaching? Okay, does it move me? Does it teach me? I mean, the Word of God, we have to start there. And then second, how's the worship? I mean, does it set my heart on fire? And then here's the third one. How's the fellowship? Like, am I going to make good friends here? Are there people here like me that I'm going to be able to connect with that are going to pour into me? And I'm sitting there across the dinner table from this guy, and an old friend of mine, and I'm listening to this, and I'm just reminded of my younger self. I'm reminded of exactly how I used to think of church, because I had been such a consumer. I mean, just so self-absorbed in my entire approach. And I was taken back to like my pre-gen way of thinking about this. But she taught me to see it differently. She showed me a different way. She taught me that like if I want to be filled up, somehow I have to find a way to pour myself out. And here's what I know. The more self-absorbed I am, the shallower my experience becomes. And like this is true in every arena, like in family life, this is true. In marriage, it's true. In parenting, it's true. This is true in friendships that I've had. This is true when I coach basketball. When it becomes about me, it becomes shallow. It's true in anything that I do that has something to do with people. And this is especially true for me and has been over the years when it comes to church. The more it's about me, the shallower it is. So random question, this is going to be really random. How many of you have ever watched House Hunters? How many of you? Oh, good. Okay, we have a lot of people familiar with House Hunters. When you're watching that show, does it ever bug you how self-absorbed some people are? Like they're explaining to the realtor like everything they need in a house, and does it make you want to throw up sometimes? Like, and they have to have it, and if they can't have it, they start crying because, oh my gosh, the washing machine might be on the wrong floor. I don't know. I mean, I watch the show, and actually, Jen watches the show. But I watch with her, to be selfless. So I watch these couples, and it just bugs me because they can be so stinking self-absorbed. So Jen came across a spoof video called Church Hunters. And it's sort of mocking the idea of people being completely self-absorbed about church. And the idea is you really shouldn't treat church like you would treat a house. And I think this is really well done. If you don't think this is awesome, you need awesome lessons. But I'm just saying, okay. If you want to have the ultimate shallow church experience, then be petty, and be critical and be self-absorbed about it. But just like anything else in life, even in church, the same law is in effect. If you want to be filled up, find a way to pour yourself out. Now, this brings us to the application portion of this message. And this is where some of you might start squirming. You might get a little nervous because you heard the announcement earlier if you were listening about the ministry fair that Jen talked about. That we're just going to kind of show different ministries that are available that you could be involved with if you want. And some of you are already thinking I know you are. Some of you are okay, is this where I get guilted into serving? First of all, let me say, you can serve in a ministry or a whole slew of ministries and still be plagued by a self-absorbed attitude. You can. Okay, just serving in ministries is not the goal here for us. You can do all of that and still be really self-absorbed. You can. It isn't ultimately about serving in a ministry. In fact, all of the things that make a church community strong, like people serving in ministries, is only really a small part of it. The official organized part of the thing. Really, what I'm talking about here is a pervasive attitude that we learn and become able to take with us everywhere we go. And it is so much more than volunteering. It's how we interact with people, with each other, before church and after church and during the week. Am I looking for ways to connect with people and to pour into them and to love them and serve them? Do I listen to people's stories and think how can I love this person well? And for some of you, it might be as simple as just inviting someone to go to lunch with you after church. That's just so you know, that's not an official church ministry, but it could be a very impactful thing to do. It turns out that breaking bread is still pretty cool with other people. It still matters. For some of you, it might be going into your life group with really a renewed mindset. It's not just this, what will I get out of it? But instead, the group, realizing that the group gives you a context to love and serve because you get an opportunity to get to know people, and you will have the opportunity there to love them if you're looking for it. Life groups provide a great context for this, but you have to be looking and you have to be listening. See, it's just always being on the lookout for opportunities to love and serve. And I have to tell you guys, this is part of why I love this church so much. Because you guys really do, for the most part, embody this. No church does this perfectly, but you guys do this really well. This is not a church that is filled with petty, critical, self-absorbed people. And you guys are always, it just seems like you're always on the lookout for ways to love. And you know, I just think the more we do that, the more amazing we can be together. Okay, now, we do have a ministry fair coming up. And for some of you, serving in a ministry might be a very natural next step. And if so, I really encourage you to take a few minutes, like after church, and just browse what's down there. But I want to hammer on the very same ministry that Jen brought up earlier, which is our kids program, our kids church program. She said it takes about 50 volunteers to make that thing run. And you're like, really? There's 50 volunteers down there right now? No. There are 50 volunteers total, and they rotate. Because it's not healthy for anyone to be missing church and be serving down there week after week after week. But we're currently at, I think, about 22 volunteers of the 50 we need. Does that mean there's no kids' church programs? No, it means the same people are serving week after week after week. I mean, they're on and then they're only off like 3 weeks. And so I just want to say to some of you guys, if you're looking for something impactful to do, where you're pouring yourself out for the sake of others, helping in kids' church is an incredible opportunity to do that. It is. And some of you go, well, I don't want to be in a context where I have to like teach the Bible. I mean, I don't know the Bible. Look, there's a curriculum and it walks you through what you're doing for the morning. And you say, well, but there might be a kid in there that asks me like a theological God question and I don't have the answer. Yes. And you just say, I don't know. Why don't you ask your mommy and daddy? You don't have to answer all the questions. You don't have to be a Bible scholar or a theologian to do this. You have to be willing to love kids. There's training and there's all sorts of great tools that are available to you to help you do it if you're willing to do it. Some of you are freaking awesome with kids. And this would be an amazing opportunity for you to serve God and for you to serve families and serve kids. And we need you. We do need you. And so if you're sitting here going, well, would you want me? Yes. Yes, we would. There will be a background check, and if you fail that, no, we don't. If you know you're going to fail it, then maybe move on to a different ministry. But let me bring this thing to a close. And just the main idea that I want you to walk away with is this. The more self-absorbed you are, the shallower church will be. And just like in family, just like in marriage, just like in parenting, just like in friendship, just like in anything we do that involves people, the more self-absorbed you are, the shallower life will be. And church is no different. And I want to say, I'm not bringing this up so that anyone feels guilty. In fact, if you think that I'm like somehow staring at you individually in this message, I just want you to know I am not staring at you. Okay, I am not judging you. And so if you feel like, oh, I feel like you're judging me. I feel like, stop it, okay? I'm not. If this is like making you feel inadequate in some way, then I just want you to know this thing has gone like totally haywire. That's not the goal here. I'm simply pointing out that the more you find ways to love and serve, the deeper your experience is going to be. And so I just encourage you to ask yourself, are there any opportunities for me to love and serve more? Because this is what makes church community beautiful. This is what gives it real power. This is what gives it real depth. And I just want to close with a very heartfelt example of why this matters so much. Many of you know Chris and Alicia Perry. You know that this summer has and I think, yeah, you see they're there with their kids. And many, those of you that know them, you know that this has been the summer from hell for them. To start the summer, Chris was healthy and active and doing everything that you would normally do. He had a little bit of back pain, went to the doctor, and after an MRI, they discovered he had cancer all through his back. Within weeks, and after a very immediate, very severe surgery, he was wheelchair bound. And it has been a summer of radiation and chemo and getting used to life in a wheelchair. But what's been a really small light in all of this is their community. People have come out of the woodwork, primarily from this church, but also other people in their life as well, but primarily from this church, to love and to serve them, providing meals to them several times a week. At first, renting and then buying a wheelchair-accessible van for them. And then when that thing broke down, fixing up the wheelchair-accessible van for them. Friends coming over just to watch ball games, just to hang out. Buying them a new couch so that both of them could actually sit on the couch together given their new reality. Modifying their house for them over and over and over to try to make it more and more useful for them. I mean, the love that has been poured out from you guys has been unreal. And you guys have embodied in this situation the church that Jesus described. It has been anything but self-absorbed. And it has made a huge difference. I mean, it has made a huge difference. Throughout the summer, Alicia has sent out updates and prayer requests to anybody willing to pray for them. And I have been so struck in her words by how much your guys' love has meant. So in thinking about why it matters so much that we live love in toward one another, I want to just read for you a couple of Alicia's comments. And I pulled these directly out of emails that she has sent over the summer. And by the way, she and Chris gave me permission to share this with you guys. But here are a couple that just really struck me. After describing the state of things and sort of asking for prayer, on September 12th, so this is not just a few weeks ago, Alicia finished the email with this, and she said, "To end, I just want you to know that we're doing okay over here. Despite how much our life has changed over the last few months, I feel like we are able to breathe. Since June, I've been reminded that God gives us just enough for today, like the Israelites and the manna, and to not think about tomorrow because today is all we need to worry about. That still holds true 2.5 months later. I don't know what people without faith would do given our circumstances, and I don't know what people without my network of people would do in our circumstances either. Thank you for everything. I'm so grateful." And then this is the one that hit me the most. This is from August 17th, and I remember getting this one. And it's not very often that I'll just read something and cry. But back on August 17th, she wrote this, and she was describing their doctor visit that week. And she said, "We went over week by week what our lives have looked like since June 13th, with the doctor. Chris said that we've been to hell and back, and that is so true. After we told her what life has looked like, she stopped and said that she is amazed that we are where we are. She cannot believe how well we have coped and adapted considering how poorly we were not prepared for everything after leaving the hospital post-surgery, and how quickly the tumors grew. She says, you guys, the best doctors in the world are looking at us in disbelief that we are still standing." Well, Chris is sitting in a wheelchair, but you know what I mean. After what we've gone through. And she says, "I cannot say this loudly enough," and this is in all caps because she put it in all caps in the email. Please hear this. She said, "We would not be in this place mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually without the network of people around us." And she just says, "Thank you." Now, you know why loving and serving matters so much? Because people matter, man. People matter more than anything else on earth, and we know this. And so, what is this thing all about? What are we doing? What is this all about? It's about love lived. See, being self-absorbed and critical, it was never the point. Love lives, serving one another, caring for one another, encouraging one another, teaching one another, growing one another, protecting one another, providing for one another. This has always been the point. And on the night of the Last Supper, Jesus, after teaching this many, many times, just over and over again throughout his ministry, came back to the importance of it one more time. And it says, when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. You'll be blessed if you do them. And again, I think we could take that teaching and we could summarize it this way. If you want to be filled up, find a way to pour yourself out. And so I just want to pause here and say to you, if you're here this morning and you're in a spot in your life where you are feeling empty, like if you struggle with bitterness or anger or jealousy or emptiness, and you think the answer is that focusing more on you is what you need the most, I just want to tell you, you could not be more wrong. Here's the deal. This is the secret that happy people learn. If you want to be happy, you have to find a way to give yourself away. You will never be happy as long as it's all about you. Even if you get everything it is that you're seeking, even if you become the best possible version of you, even if you get the income and the job and the body, even if you get the car and the house and all the respect, if it's all about you, you will always be empty. And I just invite you, think about the happiest people that you know. And here's what I bet you'll find. Here's the common denominator. I bet it's not their body fat level. I bet it's not their income level. I bet it's not their educational level. I bet it's not their career success or any other accomplishments. When you see people that are truly, truly happy, the common denominator is that one way or another, they have found a way to give themselves away. They've learned how to pour themselves out. They have discovered a context for it, and they know that their life is making a meaningful contribution to other lives. And it really comes down to this. There are two ways of living. I can make it about me, or I can pour myself out.